Thank you very much, Brian, and the rest of the board in the LA. I am absolutely honored. Thank you very much for for that. Um, I got nothing to say. Thank you. That's fantastic. I appreciate it. As we come to the end of 2025, thought I would share a couple of major updates and give some context. I believe most of this information will get folded into the LA's annual kind of State of the Lake summary. And so if that is not out already, that should be out fairly soon. So here's the context for that. So where are we at for the year 2025? 2025 has been an unbelievably low flow year. As we all have recognized at this point, we have been in the midst of a massive drought. It depends on kind of what area of the state you're looking at and what gauge you're looking at, but it's not a stretch to say that the amount of precipitation we've received this year is among the lowest we've seen even in the last century. Like some areas of the state, absolutely in the last century. So an unbelievably low flow year. Here in Grand Lake St. Mary's, the only month that we had somewhat normal stream flows was the month of April. It was fairly normal, maybe even up a few percent ticks. But that was it. Every other month was down quite a bit in terms of tributary loading, in terms of surface flows. It wasn't just the rain totals that were low for 2025. The timing was also a little bit weird because when we did have rain, it was sort of few and far between. And so a lot of the rains that we did get ended up sort of soaking into the earth and not really running off, because when it did rain, it was raining on really dry ground. We had some months that were up to 80% less in terms of daily stream flow, daily gallons going into the lake. The average, when you look across all of the months, including April, which was a fairly normal month, on average, we were down about 55% or so in terms of our daily flows. Again, resultant of this being one of the driest years on record. This comes on the tail end of a couple of other dry years, 2023 and 2024, but those two were nowhere near sort of in the ballpark of what we experienced this past year. Those stream flows that did make it into Grand Lake, very happy to say, a very large percentage, very large fraction were picked up by our main wetlands and processed and filtered and doing what we know that they can do. In total, this past year in 2025, we were able to direct 757 million gallons of water into our wetlands for this past year. This is up from last year. Last year we were at about 620 million gallons. The year before that we were at about 440. So this is a very positive trajectory. When we compare the 757 million gallons that were processed this year by our four main wetlands, Prairie, Coldwater, Beaver, and Big Chickasaw, when we compare those to the actual stream flows in those systems, this is about 15% or so of every drop of water that moved through Coldwater Creek or every drop of water that moved through Prairie Creek. These are big percentages, big fractions of those creeks went through, or the equivalent went through these wetlands. About 3 to 5% of Beaver Creek got processed, and 4 or 5% of Big Chickasaw Creek got processed. Our field and lab observations from this year, as you guys have seen over the course of the last handful of months, they've continued to demonstrate that these wetlands, as long as they're managed and they're sort of, we look over them, these wetlands continue to be nutrient and sediment sinks. They continue to improve water quality. And that's not without quite a bit of effort on a huge team, but it continues to demonstrate that these things are a positive force for improving water quality. In terms of exactly how many pounds of nitrogen, how many pounds of dirt, how many pounds of phosphorus these wetlands pulled out, we are in the late stages of sort of concatenating all that data together. So we'll have the full annual fact sheet and report, and that'll be for 2025. That'll be released to everybody at the February meeting. So the next time that we see each other, that report will be in your hands. I'll be excited to share some of those specific numbers. The 2025 update on the algal community, we had a good year. We had a great year. Our weekly values for this past fall averaged about 27 micrograms per liter. This is about 41% less than historical averages. Our spring values were at 20. That's about 60% less than the historical average when you look at week by week going back for the last 10 to 15 years. And our weekly values for summer were about 26. This is, again, about 42% less than our historical averages. And our winter values continue to be low and respectable. When we look at where we're at in terms of the benchmarks of the World Health Organization or the state of Ohio's benchmarks or the federal EPA's benchmarks, we were only above the WHO average, only about 17 weeks, and a couple of those weeks were just on it. They were just flirting with that. We were never really, massively above that except for a couple of weeks, and you can see those spikes. So we really only had 2 weeks this past year that were what I would consider to be kind of egregiously high. And these are important. Every single year that we see improved water quality, that historical average becomes harder to reach, if that makes sense. It becomes harder to meet that goal of being less than that every single year. And yet we keep doing it. We keep getting better and better and better. If we were to compare 2025 to, say, the worst couple of years on record, if you were to go back to, say, 2014, 2015, 2016, we wouldn't be, 60% less for spring values. It would be closer to 90, 95% less. So when we look at these improvements, we're looking at an average of the good years and the bad years, and we're still meeting those improvement goals of being better than the average. That's our goal every year, just be better than the average, and that gets tougher and tougher every year, but we keep getting better and better in the sense that we keep doing more and more on the watershed. This is a community-wide effort, and I appreciate the role that every single person plays in that. There can't just be one person. It's a lot of people involved, and unfortunately we don't get to recognize every single person involved in all this every single week. I wish we could, but a lot of people involved, and looking forward to seeing what next year brings. With next year, we'll have a little bit of an expanded algal community monitoring capacity. A big thank you to a whole myriad of local Rotary International clubs, as well as the LAA. This was sort of a team effort between a half dozen or so Rotary clubs here in Salinas, St. Mary's, the surrounding areas, as well as the LAA. But they sort of pulled together some funding to purchase a brand new piece of equipment that's going to automatically identify down to the family level all the different types of algae that are out there. Up until this point, we've been sort of limited in our capacity in that we can distinguish the cyanobacterial bloom, which is kind of the big bad. That's the first one. If you can only do one thing, that's what you want to do. You want to distinguish the cyanobacteria. And we can do that now. But what we have seen is that as our water quality has improved over the last decade, is we have seen a shift during much of the year. We've seen a shift where the algal community is not dominated by the cyanobacteria. And up until this point, that's kind of that's what we could say. We can say the algal community is not dominated by cyanobacteria, and then we just sort of stop. What this new piece of equipment will do for us when it gets delivered, hopefully we can launch it in early 2026. What this new piece of equipment will do is it's going to tell us all of the other algal community groups, all of those healthy algae that a lot of lakes around the state kind of take for granted, that we haven't seen high numbers of in probably decades. We're starting to see upticks in those. This piece of equipment is going to give us an expanded capability to track some more of the good news as opposed to just looking exclusively at the bad ones, the cyanobacteria. So we're really excited about that, and we are very grateful for our community support, because without it, it's not possible. This wasn't coming from a federal grant or a state grant, anything like that. This is coming from our local community groups all joining together. For 2025, for wetlands, we are going to be not just focused on the sort of four big ones, the Prairie Creek, Coldwater Beaver, and Big Chickasaw. We are going to be expanding the monitoring scope quite a bit as we sort of, look to really assess all of the different habitats in the watershed. because there's been a lot of habitat restoration. It's not just the 4 that we talk about every single week. There's a whole lot more going on. So 2025, we're going to be expanding the monitoring scope. It's about time. And we're going to be looking at not just the big 4. We'll be presenting data and results to everybody here monthly on places like Burntwood Creek, Monroe Creek, Little Chickasaw Creek, that stream restoration and wetland expansion over there, the new Red Wing Nature Preserve, the North Shore Green Space, even the small Gilliland Nature Preserve that you can see sort of photographed there, as well as Rosenbeck Nature Preserve over by Coldwater. We'll be looking at all of those. And we're not going to present data on every single one of those at every single LAA meeting. We'd be here until the end of time. But we'll be sort of picking a smattering of those, a selection of those every time that we give an update. And so you guys will get a chance to hear a little bit more about some additional conservation projects. And so we're excited about that and looking forward to expanding things for 2026 as we leave this year. So I'll take any questions you got. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. With that, I am going to turn it over to Teresa.